Okay, today the video is about 1.4 angle relationships. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the adjacent angle. And so the definition is that adjacent angles share a common vertex, and a common ray. They also have no common interior points. And essentially, the two angles are next to each other, is essentially what it means. So next to each other is an adjacent angle. Okay? The next one is complementary, and complementary basically means two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. Okay? They can be adjacent or non-adjacent, meaning they can be next to each other or not next to each other. Okay? So for example, this angle could be 40 and 50, and if we add them together, 40 plus 50 equals 90. Same thing over here. If this angle was 40 and this angle was 50, we'd have 40 plus 50 equaling 90. Okay, thus being complementary. Okay, these are typically our right angles. Okay, so complementary, two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. All right. Next one is vertical. Vertical are non-adjacent, meaning not next to, angles formed by intersecting lines. Okay? These angles are congruent. So, congruent to each other. Okay, if we look at our picture, the angles across, and I'm using these tick marks to recognize that they are congruent. And so the angles on top and bottom are congruent to each other and are vertical, and the angles to the left and right. So left angle is congruent to right angle, and top angle is congruent to bottom angle. Okay. The next is supplementary, and similar to complementary, it is the sum of two angles, but this time two angles are going to add up to 180. So two angles whose sum is 180 degrees. And these are typically can be adjacent or non-adjacent, meaning they can be next to each other or not. And one little more fun pair is that these are typically linear pairs, which we'll talk about here in a second. Okay, so I can have 80 and 100, and so if I have 100 plus 80, I get 180. I could have 180 over here. Let's see, they're adjacent. I could have 100 plus 80, gives me 180. Okay, so supplementary means two angles that, when added together, they equal 180 degrees. Next one's perpendicular. Perpendicular are lines that intersect and form four right angles. Okay, which are all congruent. So it forms four right angles which are all congruent. The symbol looks like an upside down T, typically with like a right angle indicator, but just the upside down T. So if we look on our picture here, these two lines intersect, forming a 90-degree or a right angle. Okay, so we can underline and draw an arrow and say that right angles are 90 degrees, which we learned in 1.3. But there should be 4 right angles. Okay, so 4 right angles, all of which will be 90 degrees. That is the definition of perpendicular. 2 lines that intersect to form 4 congruent right angles. Okay. The last thing is linear pair, and a linear pair is similar to an adjacent angle as it is 2 angles that are next to each other. So adjacent angles with uncommon sides being opposite of a ray. And what that means is rays or a line. Okay? And what that means is I have a line or, 2 lines intersecting like so, or just a ray, which would be just part of a line. And I end up with 2 adjacent angles as such, and they add up to 180 degrees. So I have 130 plus 50, resulting in 180 degrees, meaning that linear pairs are supplementary. Okay, so linear pairs are supplementary. And that is it for the vocab of 1.4 angle relations. Okay, now let's talk about how we use this in our assignment. So using the diagram above here, we're going to determine some angles. So we need acute vertical angles, and if you remember, acute means less than 90, okay? And we need vertical angles. So we need to find where the lines intersect. So they intersect at point F, they intersect at point D, and they intersect at point C. And we can see at these points we have some acute angles. They also intersect at B and E, but if you notice that B and E are perpendicular, so we don't want to use those for this part of the assignment. So at point C, our acute angles are here and here, because the other two are obtuse. At point D, we have the acute angles here and here. And at point F, we have the acute angles here and here that are all vertical. Remember, they're opposite sides of each other, and they're going to be congruent. So I can label these angles as angle LCK is congruent to angle BCD. I can say angle BDC is congruent to angle JDF. I can also say angle HFG is congruent to angle DFNE. Okay, you want to use 3 points to make your angle so that you can better identify. Because if you just say point F or angle F, that could be any one of these 4, and we want to be very specific with what we are naming. Okay? The next one is a linear pair with angle BDF, and if we look at BDF, we're right here, B, D, and F, so we're looking at this angle right here. Okay, we need a linear pair. Or a linear pair is going to be either FDJ, so we would have this one right here, or BDC as our 2 linear pairs, as they are adjacent angles. They're next to BDF, and if we were to add them together, they would be supplementary. So we could have angle BDC and angle FDJ. Okay, either one of those would work. For our two adjacent angles to DFE, so we have DFE, so this angle right here, we're looking for two adjacents, so we could have this one right here, which would be DFH, so DFH angle. And if we look here again, we're looking at DFE, so DFE. So our other adjacent angle would be right here, okay, which is EFG. Angle EFG. Okay, angle supplementary to KCD. So KCD is this angle over here. Okay, now I need the linear pair, because if I have the linear pair, I know that's supplementary, which means I need the adjacent angle that is next to this, which is going to be LCK. So angle LCK and angle or BCD. So angle BCD. Both of those will allow me to have the linear pair, which means that they will end up being supplementary. Okay? Now we're going to solve for x for the following problem. So I have the measure of ABE equals 3x plus 6. So if we go over here and look, we have ABE, and if we notice, this angle is a vertical angle with this box right here. And so since it's a vertical angle, that means this is also going to have a box because they are congruent. And that box represents 90 degrees. So if ABE, the measure of ABE is 90 degrees, I can rewrite this as 90 is equal, and I draw my line through my equal sign to show that I have two sides. And now I do algebra to solve this. Remember, if you do not remember how to solve an algebra problem, to do PEMDAS in reverse. And since we are going to do PEMDAS in reverse, I check to see if there's any addition or subtraction, and there's addition. So I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides, and I end up with 84 is equal to 3x. There's no addition or subtraction at this line, so I check multiply and divide, and I have multiplication, so I need to do the opposite, which is division. So I'll divide both sides by 3. My 3's cancel, just like my 6's did up before. And I'm left with 84 divided by 3, which if I do long division, 3 goes into 8 2 times, resulting in 6. Subtract out the 2, bring down the 4. 3 times 8 will give me 24, so x will equal 28. And my next problem over here, I have 5x plus 10, the measure of KCL, and the measure of LCB. So if I come here and check KCL and LCB, if I add those together, if we notice they're adjacent, which means that they are a linear pair. So the measure of KCL plus the measure of LCB equals a linear pair supplementary, which means they're 180 degrees. So now I can plug this in, and I get 5x plus 10 plus 4x minus 10 equals 180. I can combine like terms using my table where I have x and a constant. I have 5x plus 4x, which gives me 9x. And I have 10, positive 10 and negative 10, which gives me 0. So I result in 9x equaling 180. If I were to do long division now, because I am doing my PEMDAS like I did over here, I would divide by 9, resulting in x equaling 20. Where 180 divided by 9, 9 goes into 18 twice, resulting in 18. Bring down my 0, 9 goes into 0 0 times, so my answer is 20. Okay? The last question says two angles are supplementary. One angle is 32 degrees less than the other. So I have two angles that are supplementary. Supplementary means they're 180. So I'm going to have x. One angle is 32 less than the other, so plus x minus 32, which is equal to 180. Well, if I combine like terms, I end up with 2x minus 32 equals 180. I add 32 to both sides, and I end up getting 212 is equal to 2x. I divide both sides by 2, and I get x is equal to 106, where 212 divided by 2 goes in here once, 0, 6, 2, 0, 1.